Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 238, The Sequence of the Restoration, Part 5. The podcast objectives are reveal the primary work of the Spirit in these last days, revisit the first 6 seasons of the restoration, reveal the 3 promises Elohim makes to those who keep the law, and analyze the power and preparation. This lesson contains timelines and other visuals. Therefore, if you are listening to the podcast, I advise you to watch the video version on our website or YouTube, or request a PDF of the lesson so you can add the visual effect. The season of preparation. Now, in the most recent podcast, we analyzed the 6 of the 7 major events that occurred during the restoration of the nation of Israel, i.e., the healing of the nation. That leaves one final event for us to cover, the final phase of the first season in these last days. As you can see by the timeline below, the final event that occurred during the restoration is the preparation of the nation. Here's a question. What was the nation of Israel being prepared for during this final phase? The answer, the sealing of the set-apart ones. This speaks to the connection between the Spirit and the renewed nation of Israel. Vis-a-vis, as the seal of Elohim is a super feature of his Spirit, it is impossible to be sealed if you do not have the Spirit of Elohim. This speaks to a critical aspect of the great work the Spirit has been designated to execute in these last days. And it is why this season of preparation is so crucial to our survival. Consider this. The primary work of the Spirit in these last days is to seal the children of Elohim. In doing so, he will guard us during the great distress and ensure that we do safely enter the reign of Yahushua Messiah in the millennial kingdom. This speaks to the factor of preparation. To wit, you cannot obtain the seal of Elohim in any spiritual state. You must be qualified. You must be prepared. Needless to say, we were not qualified prior to the restoration of the nation. Likewise, we would not be qualified overnight. Remember, the nation endured 6 seasons of restoration to get us to this point. Therefore, to better understand all the factors that pertain to our qualification, we should quickly review the 6 leading seasons of the restoration of the nation of Israel. Then we will resume our analyses of the season of preparation. Quickened by the Spirit. Per the timeline below, and as you already know, the restoration of the nation began with Israel in a state of spiritual death. Here again, This death does not suggest the entire nation was completely void of the Spirit. As I said before, many of us had received the Spirit prior to the restoration. However, even though we had received the Spirit in times past, we did not have access to all his faculties, for we were under the dispensation of blindness. See Romans 11:25. Notwithstanding, in the leading frame of the restoration, this blindness was lifted. And all the areas in which Israel had been dead were quickened by the Spirit and quickly made alive. He raised up messengers. This brings us to the rise of the messengers, i.e., the second season within the restoration. The need for this season is sure, vis-a-vis, once the blindness was lifted, the nation needed to hear the word of truth Elohim has for his people in these last days. Seeing as this truth is not being taught or preached in the religious circuit, Elohim did what he always does. He raised up messengers who exist outside of the mainstream religious structure. He authorized men and women who have high spiritual character and values, and who are not respecters of persons, to share the truth with his people concerning these last days. Those who received and those who were deceived. This brings us to the dissemination of the message, i.e., the third season within the restoration. Per this season, we highlighted the importance of, you guessed it, the Spirit and his role in this procedure. Explicitly, we analyzed how the dissemination of the message, i.e., the truth, empowered the nation of Israel to acquire spiritual vision. This was important because while Yahuwah raised up his messengers to speak the truth to his people, Satan raised up his messengers to deceive them. This phenomenon led to a chasm within the nation of Israel, depicted by those who received the true message of restoration and those who were deceived into believing a doctored version of it. Once the blindness was gone. Now, this brings us to the unification of the nation, i.e., the fourth season within the restoration. During this season, all who received the message of restoration were unified in the Spirit, and they continued to be led into more truth. This leading paved the way to their spiritual renaissance, i.e., the fifth season within the restoration. Remember, all of Israel was in some state of death prior to the restoration, per the dispensation of blindness, which prevented us from acquiring the spiritual sight required to receive and to be led into all truth. However, once the blindness was gone, we unlocked the power to receive our sight. And as we walked in the truth, we found new life as our souls were awakened and quickened by the light. Yet under the curse. Now, this brings us to the healing of the nation, i.e., the sixth season within the restoration, and the topic of our most recent podcast. Naturally, upon experiencing a spiritual awakening, all the areas in our lives which were not in good health could finally be healed. For the Spirit is the agent of healing who leads us to a life of abundance and in full. From now, we have begun to realize the blessings of Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, not because we are lucky, but because we are guarding the commands and walking in obedient faith to the Father's will. And this, my friends, is one of the ways you can tell who is truly under the restoration. For we have been healed, and blessings have been restored unto us. As for those who make this claim falsely, they can do everything they want to look the part and convince you they are part of the renewed nation of Israel. And yet, all you have to do is look at the quality of their life, and you will plainly see these individuals are not living a life of abundance, for they are yet under the curse. A season of power. Now, this brings us to the preparation of the nation, the final phase of the restoration of the nation of Israel. Seeing as all the phases before it were heavily centered on the work of the Spirit of truth and power, the same rule was applied to this phase. The preparation of the nation was a season of power in which the renewed nation of Israel was empowered to become masters of the Father's will. And through their mastery of his will, they ensured the will of Elohim would be done in their lives in each ensuing season in these last days. Ezekiel 36, 26 to 28 reads, "And I shall give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. And I shall take the heart of stone out of your flesh, and I shall give you a heart of flesh, and put my spirit within you. And I shall cause you to walk in my laws, and guard my right rulings, and shall do them. And you shall dwell in the land that I gave your fathers, and you shall be my people, and I shall be your Elohim." This passage clearly reveals that the renewed nation of Israel would be empowered by the Spirit to walk in his laws and to guard his commands. Here lies the inflection in one of the telltale signs concerning those who are truly under the restoration. Those who are truly under the restoration are guarding the commands. They are not lawbreakers who refuse to guard the Torah and the commands of Elohim as their forefathers. Quite the contrary. Those who are truly under the restoration are law keepers who love the Torah and guard the commands due to the power of the Spirit they have received from the Father. This is why Elohim makes us three precious promises. One, you shall dwell in the land that I gave your fathers. Two, you shall be my people. And three, I shall be your Elohim. Anyone who honestly believes Yahuwah Elohim is making these promises to lawbreakers is spiritually insane. And I do not make this indictment lightly. Just think about it. Would a sane man call Elohim a liar? I think not. And yet, here is what I know. the renewed nation of Israel was empowered to walk in the Torah of Elohim and to guard his commands. And we are. And in doing so, we have made an amazing discovery, which I will offer as a final interest point for this lesson. The power we have received to guard the commands of Elohim experiences a constant upsurge as we walk in obedient faith to his will. And in the sure course of time, we will find ourselves exercising authority and dominion over every enemy who stands in our way. Now, here is the final word. The same way there is power in preparation, you need power to be prepared. To begin with, you need power to eliminate every degree of lawlessness that would prevent you from guarding the commands of Elohim and becoming masters of his will. Remember, you cannot obtain the seal of Elohim if you have sin in your life, for it is impossible to continue in sin and guard the commands. For sin is the transgression of the law. And yet, your acquisition of power does not stop there. It does not end with your acquisition of the seal of Elohim. My dear friends, obtaining the seal of Elohim is just the beginning. There are hundreds of major crises waiting for each of us during the time of the Great Distress and even after. The question of the hour is, how are you going to overcome them? How are you going to survive them? The answer is sure. With the power source you activated during the restoration, which is being proliferated as you observe the guidelines of the seal of Elohim. Heretofore, we have come full circle in this podcast ministry. We are now back where we began. We are highlighting the unlimited value of dominion, authority, and power, and we will do so again. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 238, The Sequence of the Restoration, Part 5. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 240, The People and Places of the Restoration, Part 1. I will post this podcast on Monday, November 6th, 2023. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch. Continue to pray. Continue in fasting. And most of all, continue to be focused. For the end is coming. The end is near.